Preston, thank you for joining us on what is hopefully the first episode of a regular podcast on the ground, where we're going to take a sort of deeper look into the ongoings and the day-to-day runs of the club with yourself.
I have a question on the ground, like 1 out of 10 name. I'm actually thinking we should let the fans vote on what the name of this podcast is.
Yeah,
because we couldn't actually think of a good one. So we went with that, which is like a 4 out of 10. We should probably just ask everyone else what they think it should be called, and then go with that. Everything is on the table. Hashtag wag me out. We considered that anyways. Whatever you guys want, throw some ideas, and then we'll decide what it's called officially later.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Get your ideas in the comments. To kick things off, we've obviously put the tweet out earlier in the week asking fans to send in their questions. We had a lot of responses. I think
more than I thought.
150 within the first few hours, that was. But we whittled them down to some important ones. We're going to obviously be doing more than one episode of this, so we'll have a chance to cover the ones that we perhaps haven't in this episode in future episodes. But I suppose to address the elephant in the room, one of the best questions that we had, I think, to kick things off was, what was the reason that you stepped back from your role and then changed your mind? Also, how do you think that makes the club look in the fans' eyes?
Ooh, that last part's a good question. I honestly haven't looked at a lot of these. I looked at some, and then there were so many I actually gave up on that process. The second part of that's a good question. I hadn't considered it. Truthfully, originally, I felt pretty exhausted by the last 2.5 years. Everyone warned me that I didn't know what I was getting into with English football, and they were right for a lot of reasons. There was a lot of extremes on both sides. Obviously, the first season being pretty negative, last season being like the best of the best as far as like the fan experience and like ownership experience. So it just felt like a good time to step back. It also, I think, became pretty apparent within 5 to 6 weeks. Partly, I was missing it a little bit, I think, truthfully, and I needed to also kind of commit to my family in some ways over the summer and longer term. But I think it became evident to me and to some others in our ownership group that if we want to really do what's best for the club and try to be a club that can sustain at the League One level, it was paramount that I'm involved, since Eben and I both were just in the mix from day one in about what's been almost 2.5 years now. And that experience that we've gained, and the feedback we've gotten from fans and everything we've learned along the way was important. And so for me, I felt kind of a duty to our investors to try to keep our club at League One level, as well as the fans to keep their club at League One level. Like it kind of was obvious, and one of those things that just made too much sense not to do it. But I said, if I'm going to do it, I need to actually be on the ground day to day at a level where before we haven't been able to give you guys the hands here in the office, especially, that were necessary to do things at a proper level. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish, as create an infrastructure and everything around the club that gives us that opportunity, and also just helps you guys. So we're doing a ton from ownership that, granted, I would make visits here and there, was still far from, I think, the impact that we want to make and the improvements we want to accomplish together. So it's kind of a mix of business, felt like a duty to this club in a way, a duty to the fans, and kind of the ownership group. So that's kind of where I landed, and then it took some convincing with the family a little bit, but we're easing into it some. But for now, I'll be here for a while.
Yeah, it leads us nicely on to the next one. It says, hi Preston, now you're moving over and you plan to be in Crawley a lot more. Are there plans to hold a face-to-face fans forum? It feels a little too impersonal writing in questions, and it's been a while since we've been able to have a group discussion face-to-face.
Sure. I think the last one was February, right after the transfer window, and things from there went pretty well. So we just kind of let the club play it out and didn't want to distract anyone from anything else. But I think we have one. I'm not sure if it's 100%, but it's close, for Monday, August 5th. I'm not sure of the time, probably around 7 p.m. But don't hold me to that time, because they're the ones that plan it. But I think August 5th, Monday, we'll do something. I'm not sure if you want to announce the other part of that, if it's been confirmed or not.
Probably
yet, not. Okay, there might be another part to that day that's exciting. But yeah, we'll go with that Monday night.
Yep. Exciting season ahead. Obviously, someone's asked, as the club owners, what are your expectations for the upcoming season in League One?
Expectations is a great word. I think, and I also that reminds me, it skipped over the second part of that first question a little bit, but how does it look as a fan when the club has a chairman step down and then step back in, and even maybe with a more enhanced role? I hope it, considering we had success and we achieved promotion last year, it looks like a positive thing, that someone that had stepped away and was going to be in the background has now decided, hey, I want to actually put more effort here. But I can understand where there are some critics or some people that would say, oh, they don't know what's going on over there in Crawley. I get it, but the truth is, I think if we had transitioned people brand new into the chairman roles, then that would have had a bigger argument for they don't know what's going on, they don't have experience. So that was important to us to keep the experience we do have and relationships we do have here. So to this question then, expectations, our expectation is to stay up. We don't have unrealistic expectations about, promotion from League One to Championship right away. We've had conversations even internally as office staff along with the coaching staff around this, and it's about building and sustaining Crawley Town to be a League One club because, relative to other clubs at this level, it's a massive difference than even League Two. Even with some of the extra money that comes from the EFL to League One clubs versus League Two, the spend on player wages alone, I think last year on average in League One was like 5.6 million, which for us is more than double what we're spending or what we spent last year. So it's a pretty big hurdle to climb, and so expectations need to be realistic. But we hope and are confident that our recruiting advantage that we may have, combined with Scott and his staff and their coaching development and everything else, can give us a realistic chance to be up when we're talking again here next summer with hopefully or potentially a bigger budget and things to improve on, both on the ground and then on the pitch.
Yeah, expectations was something that a lot of people seemed interested in, and was certainly had a lot of questions about the expectations of the club, but also the ownership group as well, because someone's referenced here that Waverley United's claim at the start of them taking over the club was to take Crawley to the Premier League. Is this still the challenge for you guys, or is there more shorter term goals that have become more sort of prompt and sort of need to be addressed sooner before we can dream that big?
You for sure have to accomplish things in order. If we could just get to the Premier League right away, that would be amazing. But the truth is there are shorter goals to set and try to achieve together prior to dreaming that big. But those shorter goals are like the stepping stones to dreaming that big. So it's kind of all in one, the same mindset or focus. At least that's how I look at it personally. So would we love to see Crawley in the Premier League in 15, 20 years, whatever it might be, of course. And is the first step being sustainable at League One for 3 to 5 seasons? Probably, but that's where we're trying to get to. And if we can pull that off, then it's like, okay, now how do we make the next leap like we did last year, where we're actually pushing for playoff or promotion and potentially championship? And so, yeah, you got to go step by step. And there's a lot of change in between all of that. Is a lot of fans have seen this summer with some of the player movement and recruitment as a whole. And so a lot of uncertainty in this sport, in this game. And it's just trying to set goals that are achievable step by step to ultimately, be a Premier League or championship level club one day.
Yeah, people have highlighted the fact that you guys want to be a lot more sort of clear with the fans. You want to improve the communication. That's been, topics of the past as well. And someone's asked, is this the plan for the new podcast? Is this the idea that you want to be sort of more clear with the fans, give them more information that you sort of said that you would? And also, is there any plans to work alongside the Simply Reds podcast as a part of that as well?
Okay, so I know the two people that might have wrote this question in. So this is definitely part of the plan. I think being transparent and communicating with fans, whether it's via Sam's questions or thoughts, as we do these podcast episodes, or it's the actual fan questions if we ask for them. That's also why we can have a fans forum though too. So it is more face-to-face, but that's part of me being here on the ground, us as ownership, Ben Levin as a vice chairman now, also living in London and near and on the ground most days throughout the week, should take that to another level. And he's, working a lot on the commercial side and with sponsors and trying to grow the relationships there at a level that I was unable to do if I was just here for a week or something and then, going back home for 6. So it was between the two of us, and I think the fact that it's a lot easier after a successful season than an unsuccessful one to be front facing, right? People aren't wrong where we kind of went quiet and went into hiding last year, but we kind of had to just trust our instincts on how we recruited last summer and kind of let it play itself out. And, this time I'm happy to kind of walk people through more of the decision making and what's happening on the ground, in the office, on the pitch, and with everything else. Cause it's the mood's a little better in general. So I totally get where the fans were coming from last summer, but it didn't seem as appropriate to just start, doing podcasts or posts or whatever. I think this year, especially since I'm going to be living here, pretty much full time, it makes a lot of sense to start doing something more regularly.
Perfect. The last one before we sort of get into some of the more nitty gritty questions. Someone says, "Hi Preston, I'm always optimistic as ever about CTFC, but am I right to be that way this season?"
How do you define optimistic? How would you define it?
I think they're basically saying, I'm always confident going into a season that we're going to be able to compete and, sort of do well in the league. I'll always have confidence in the manager and the team. But this season, I presume they're referencing the sort of player sort of overturn. Maybe they're thinking that we're going to be in a worse position. I'm not too sure, but that's probably how I'd read it.
Before I answer, I forgot to ask you, how did gardening go the other week?
Gardening was good.
Gardening's
good. Done. Yeah,
you finished it?
Garden is all done.
Just for those that don't know, I'm not sure if I'm not supposed to say this. You can edit it out. But
feel free.
Sam's a new homeowner. Just did some gardening in his backyard. I haven't seen it yet, but I was proud of him. I just wanted to give you a shout. Yeah, show me some pictures. Yeah. Or it could be the cover of this episode. Just a picture of your backyard. I don't care.
Yeah, just progression pictures.
Yeah. Episode 2, Sam's backyard this weekend. Okay. Optimistic. If optimistic for you is, so I think what you're alluding to then, or what this question might be asking, is last summer we felt uneasy about recruiting. Mm-hmm. Can we trust you again that the recruiting decisions this summer will probably yield, even if it's not playoff or promotion, but similar results where we're better than expected? I personally think so. I'm confident in our process. I'm confident in the model we use to assess player impact. I'm confident in Scott and the coaching staff. And we've added to that with, Ben Gladwin, for example, coming on full-time as a coach. It's hard, though, and again, it's that concept of uncertainty, and you get attached to certain players or certain things in life, any field, in any industry. It's hard to feel optimistic in those scenarios. Are we? Yes, I'm confident that we're going to give our club, the best chance to stay up in League One. And so from there, it's just a matter of, letting them go and earn it like we did a season ago. But I can understand why people would be uneasy for sure. It's this similar sentiment, in some ways as last year.
The majority, and when I say majority, I would probably say over 50% of the questions that we had sent in were about the squad, or about how the squad from last season. The majority of them have obviously moved on to other things. So we've sort of narrowed this down into a few questions about sort of the summer, the transfer window policy. The first question regarding that is, were the players sold because the offers were too good to refuse, or did they want to leave?
So there's a lot here, and I have looked at most of these questions in this bucket to make sure I could kind of gather all my thoughts, whatever it was, like an hour or two ago. I want to hit on a lot of it myself now, and then if I missed things, you can kind of hit on some of those others. The first part, so there was this regular sentiment that we sold 8 of our starting 11 at Wembley. That was like a regular comment or question. And, truthfully, we haven't sold 8 of 11. There's some context to a lot of this, and I'm happy to talk about as much as I can. And I think that's part of the reason we're doing this podcast. But for example, Kellen Gordon, he wasn't someone that we sold. We didn't get any fee for Kellen Gordon. Another one, Lawrence McGuire. He was actually someone that we brought in from loan because he was the backup at Chesterfield, a National League club, and he obviously did an amazing job, phenomenal, earned a ton more money in a new offer. But we didn't get any money for Lawrence McGuire. It wasn't a fee. We didn't sell him. It wasn't even our player. Yeah, he was a different team's player, and now he got a better deal somewhere else, and he took it. Will Wright's another one where he wasn't our asset. He had a decision to go play wherever he wanted, and he got a pretty significant offer. Was it Swindon, I believe, that he went to? More than our player budget and revenue model could afford. So, all power to Will. He went and made more money. He's playing at Swindon. Trying to think, Adam Campbell's another one where it wasn't our option. We didn't sell Adam Campbell. We didn't make any money for that. And then of some of those other players, there were a few that were actually unavoidable. And I think that Simply Red's podcast alluded to this on one of the episodes they did recently, where sometimes when you make deals and contracts with players, there's triggers and clauses for buyouts in the contract itself that if another club offers this, you have to let the player go. And the amount of money that some of those players were getting offered relative to what they were making with us when we were scooping them from non-league or they were backups at other clubs was 4 to 6 times as much as they were going to pay. they absolutely deserve to go make 4 to 6 times their wages to go play for another club, especially if the club is offering, a buyout. So, and that's what's in the contract, and there's nothing we can do. I think there was only one player, and people can kind of figure out who that probably was, where there was that we originally rejected a few offers for, and then the number got to a point, it was so astronomical that we, relative to our revenue model and our playing budget, we had to say yes, unfortunately. And he's also making probably over twice the money he was making with us. So it was a win-win in that sense. At the same time, do we want any of these players to leave? If we could have helped it, we would have brought everyone back. Of course. We love all of them. There was a bond between the coaches, the players, you guys, the staff, even owners that were had the opportunity to be around and be at Wembley. We love everyone, but it was just one of those things where a lot of it was unavoidable based on where we at as a club with our revenue model and everything there. So that gives you some more context on that. And then there were a lot of questions, and I want to make one more thing clear too on some of the decision making, because I think Eben's gotten thrown under the bus this summer. There were a few questions who is Eben Smith again, and why did he sell all of our players? Look, I stand by the decisions that were made as well. It wasn't just Eben; it was a club decision. But the truth is, and I said this or something to the same degree back in February, the fans forum, where I was talking about how important of a role Eben had played, and I don't think people realize, as far as our recruiting process went last year. And I can say with certainty, without Eben Smith, there is a 0% chance we're in League One right now. And so I want to make that clear. Obviously, again, I just went through a lot of those players and the decisions that had to be made this summer. It's unfortunate as a whole. We love those guys, but they were, mostly either unavoidable or just necessary in some ways. So Eben doesn't deserve any, flack for that. And if he does, then I do too. It goes both ways. It's not just, I wouldn't single him out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people naturally, when they see those players leaving, jump to conclusions. They're worried. It feels, I suppose, we were talking between us and with Ben as well in the office. He said it's probably less common than he thought that a club that got promoted would then lose that many of their players so quickly. So I think that was a shock to a lot of people. But I mean, it's obviously very rational what you're saying there. And I suppose what people want to know, which is, again, a lot of the questions were about that, is the money that we sort of earned from the players that you referenced, that some obviously had clauses that meant they were going. Obviously, there was the one player that the fee just become too much that we couldn't possibly turn it down. People want to know, I suppose, is that money being fed back into the playing budget? Is Scott going to have that at his disposal? Are you guys going to have that at your disposal for sort of the recruitment model that you have?
Yeah, the comments on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram that are upset that the owners are pocketing all of the money from these transfer fees it makes me just laugh a little bit. I mean, the truth, you can look at we've lost millions of pounds the last few years. So, that's certainly not happening. I can promise you that. And the truth is our player budget going into the season is quite a bit higher than it would have been if we were still in League Two, because of the extra money you do get in a parachute payment from the EFL, and that distribution combined with every, you guys don't say penny. What's the word?
Yeah, penny's right.
Penny of the player transfer fees going right back into the playing budget, 100%. So that's all going into that to give us the best chance to stay up and be competitive this year at League One. So if there's any concern there, whatever, that's an easy one to just push out of the way. If we were in League Two still and we didn't make those sales or transfers, our budget would be quite a bit less than it is going into this. So, hopefully that offers a little bit of context.
Yeah, we have been signing plenty of players. Just before we've sat down to record this, we just announced Armando joined us from Fleetwood. So, we've seen plenty of players come through the door.
Was that for an undisclosed fee?
That was for an undisclosed fee. Wow. So, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Says it all. Someone wants to know, how many more signings do you think we need to be competitive this season, or are we already there?
78. No, I'm just kidding. To be competitive, I think, just to be blunt, because I've been having recruiting conversations literally all day today, in and out of other meetings, this and that, but we definitely want to add to our impact at the top of the pitch with another striker and forward. I think we could use a piece in kind of that defensive midfield role that Jay does really well, and those pivots that Scott uses. He's done a good job last season. Sometimes it's a dual pivot, sometimes it's a single pivot, depending on if he's playing with, it was Orsi and Lolos up top, or Lolos more as a 10. there's a little bit of flexibility and wiggle room there, but we want to have someone that we feel like can replace Liam. Jeremy's been playing in that role in some of these friendlies and done a good job. I think overall, if we could have the flexibility to have Jeremy out wide left again, we feel like we have more depth. So yeah, there's probably another midfield kind of Jay/Liam Kelly piece we could add. Can we get, at this level, we're just going to need as many defenders and bodies as we possibly can. We probably want to get deeper at center back. So we love the fact that we were able to bring in JoJo. He's someone that we rated really high from a data perspective. And then the fact that Scott and Steve, I should say more directly, worked with him in the past. So it's a combination of a little bit of everything is probably the truth. When we brought in Max, I don't know if we announced that yesterday.
Yeah.
Was it yesterday? That's someone that's midfield, but more on the attacking side. And I think another midfielder more on the defensive side. It is probably important and crucial, and something that Scott definitely wants to bring in as well when we've had conversations with him. So do I feel optimistic now? Not as optimistic as we all will in a week or in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks. The other thing I would say, do you remember how many signings we made like mid-July on last year? It was the same sentiment last year, obviously because there's people going out that people loved, but I don't want to give away all of our strategy, but you don't want to just spend all your money right away and then just sit there and then there's better opportunities or better value in the second half of July or during August that present themselves. You want to be able to capitalize at any point during the window. Otherwise, you're actually limiting yourself and your ability to bring the most value to the club.
Well, that's just football, isn't it? There's clubs that are going to be playing players who then will maybe not be in the plans of their manager. Maybe there's a club with the new managers come in. He's played a player who would fit our system really well, doesn't fit theirs very well. After the first 3 pre-season games, that's very obvious. There. All of a sudden, they become available. So
I know patience is hard for fans, but what Sam said is a perfect example. There's opportunities that present themselves, and when you have a budget this is the budget. We need to give ourselves the best opportunity to capitalize throughout that entire window or entire process. And so, it hurts a little bit not seeing signings every day or seeing 7 or 8 go out before we really bring in 6, 7, 8. It's just kind of the nature of how we've done things the last 2 summers, but we think it's the most optimal way to do business.
Yeah, Scott summed it up quite well in his post-match actually after Wildstone that the football we've played, we've seen it so far in pre-season. It's very similar style to last year. It's obvious that the players that we've brought in have picked it up really well. I suppose when we asked for fans to send in questions, it might have been the worst time to do it after we had just lost to Wildstone. So there was naturally some people sort of were a little bit concerned, and again it leads on to the sort of will Crawley sign another striker this summer to support Rushan? Is that the plan, or is that something that we can't really say at the moment?
We plan to bring in one as long as it makes sense, relative to everything else and the numbers. We're not going to overpay for someone just to say we have a second striker in, but we definitely intend to. And I know Scott wants to have as many weapons up top to score goals at this level as possible. So I'm confident to say yes, without making a guarantee, but it's pretty close to, we'll add someone.
Yeah, sticking on the theme of transfers and the squad, you've referenced obviously Eben, you've referenced yourself working with Scott. A lot of conversation online, some stuff was sort of commented on about Tobias Phoenix. So there was a lot of questions about Tobias, what's his general involvement in the club, and linking on to, are there plans to bring in an experienced director of football / sporting director, or at least hire a part-time consultant to bounce ideas off? It feels like a lot of issues that come down to WAGMI, still being relatively new to English football, could have been avoided with more experienced head to discuss these things. That's a tough one.
I don't know if I read that one before. Read the second half. If a lot of the issues with
WAGMI. It feels like a lot of the issues that come down to WAGMI, still being relatively new to English football, could have been avoided with a more experienced head around the place to discuss things.
Should we have avoided promotion last year, Sam,
well,
if we didn't make those mistakes? They're right about the first season, of course, but that was an interesting question at this point in time. The truth is, so Tobias has actually been working for the club as a consultant since January for recruiting. He has a lot of connections and a network in Ireland and Scotland, which we thought was important for us to, not only in January if there was opportunity to bring someone in mid-season as we were making a playoff push, but especially going forward at League One level, we feel like we have a mass model that had success last year. We have a coaching staff we like. We play a style of football we like. How can we increase our scouting network? within other countries where we have opportunity. And so that was important for us. And Tobias has been helping quite a bit with that. People maybe have seen him around because he was at the playoff games, at least one of them, and then he was at Wembley as well. I mean, he's been a part of this since January. So if people were wondering because they've seen him around, that's what he's doing. And so that help, obviously, we have other people looking at data and numbers and scouting things, and that's just kind of part of the whole process. But we wanted to add to it just because we feel like as we try to progress and get better at our decision making as far as recruiting and everything else, like the more minds and the more information, the better. And especially when Tobias is able to tap into Scotland, or Max came from
Dundee
yesterday, and we have another player we signed as well. I left my phone, but there was another player, I believe, or maybe it's someone we're currently talking with that is
maybe
close.
We won't spoil that.
Yeah, but we've definitely feel like we've gotten some value from that. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think that is quite a nice thing to talk about, especially as you say, we're trying to be a little bit more transparent. So I'm sure everyone would have seen it, but for perhaps those that haven't, over the summer we obviously have gone through a little bit of a restructure. Obviously Tobias has come in to do more of the football side, and you and Ben have come in to do more of the off-field stuff as well as the on-field stuff as well. So maybe we should just break it down for the people that haven't perhaps seen it. This is, I suppose, one of the first official things we've done, really stating the actual sort of changes that have gone on over the summer. So maybe that's a good idea that we should do.
Sure. I think in some ways we addressed it in the club statement, I think, when it was like, all right, Preston's coming back. And I referenced it earlier in the podcast, I think, with Ben kind of focusing on commercial and some of the revenue stuff. And I think there's a lot of questions that we'll probably get to more on another episode to dive into. Like, for example, we've been talking with Rona on how do we bring Red's Bar back into the club properly so that we can, maximize the fact that we had a record number of season ticket sales in the summer within like 10 days or something crazy. I think the away attendance average from last year in League Two, which was like 200 something, we expect like 1,000 a game now because it's League One clubs are just supporting at that level. Like, we're going to have so many more fans. How do we, again, we're trying to sustain at League One level, of course, on the pitch, but off the pitch, that means we need to maximize every ounce of opportunity and potential revenue and profitability for the club. And so Ben will play a role in a lot of that with commercials and sponsors and revenue streams. I even did I pitch you the idea on my Reds dinners?
You did, yeah.
I did. Yeah. That's like probably better than a 4 out of 10. I don't know how often we can actually do them or how much time I'll have for them, but I thought it would be cool to like do these one-offs where it's like Reds dinner with Preston, but I actually cook the food. And beforehand, we have the players actually try and rate the food and tell us if it's shit or not, basically. And then I make that same dish for, call it like 12 fans, and they do a dinner, and it's like a direct Q&A/dinner with me, and we just eat food and hang and
more intimate
drink it.
for them,
Exactly. And so it'd be cool to do some of those and just use the Reds space more frequently. And with us now here on the ground and helping Rona, we can almost have, people here, because she does so much, because she does all the hospitality stuff and T-bars. But if like I'm here and I'm not doing anything else, like why don't we just keep Reds open for a night or two each week where I can help and just we can have people kind of manning the opportunities. So any ideas people have, we're willing to hear them, but we want to try to just do more events, do more interaction, and maximize the opportunity with Reds and everything else. I mean, ticketing, there was a ton of questions about that. We'll get into more detail. We'll have an announcement there, I think, in the next week to 2 weeks. But we're making improvements, which is ultimately the goal, so that everyone can make everyone's lives easier on the ground so they can get more things done that are sometimes more of a priority when they've been held back. You've been held back in the past,
Yeah, improvements is another popular topic. The East Stand always seems to be one of the most popular topics surrounding the club.
I've sat in it, yeah.
Yeah. Someone's asked, what are the plans with the East Stand, and have there been any improvements over the summer break?
Yeah, there were. You might even be able to rattle them off quicker than me, but there was something wrong with the floorboards in the stand. There were like the bolts even needed to get replaced. There were a few other things. We just put up the new, would you call it a banner?
Cladding, I suppose.
Cladding thing. There was something behind the East Stand that needed. Anyway, we put like 25,000 pounds into it, and the truth is we don't even own the stadium yet, but we want to give the experience, we want to improve it for the fans. Eventually it'd be nice again, we've been having and trying to have discussions with the council on acquiring the grounds so that we're more incentivized to actually put real money into maybe a brand new East Stand, from scratch. But for now, we did decide it was worthwhile. Also, there's like safety concerns and everything else too that we like have. You have to be looking out for safety first before anything else. And so we put some money into that this summer. But like as far as knocking it down and building a whole new stand, I mean, we'd love to do that eventually. Hopefully we can, or if the council wants to do it, they can. Let's talk to them. Maybe they're up for it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of subtle changes. Not just to the East Stand, we'll get more onto the stadium later on, but certainly on the East Stand, as we've already touched on, that cladding's there, so the fans will be able to see that for the first time at the Crystal Palace game. I can tell you it makes a massive difference, especially considering it's the camera-facing stand, so that makes a huge difference. Yeah. There's some, as you say, the crucial safety stuff that, we've had sort of signed off, so we know it's sort of safe for spectators. That's all been done. We've had some banners put in at the back, so it just sort of cheers it up a little bit, and it's, it's been there at the end of the day for 13 years. Or maybe more. Someone will definitely quote me on that. But you'll be able to sort of see the visual improvements. And at the moment, we've got to give a big shout out to the team of stewards who, obviously, we're literally a couple of days away from Palace now. Over the last
2 days, they've been
last
here
2 nights, they've been there on their hands
non-stop.
and knees, sort of scraping every seat. Everybody knows that the seats over there aren't what they used to be, but they are literally on their hands and knees with buckets and everything doing that. So a big shout out to them. But there's been lots of improvements, sort of a lot of them subtle, a lot of them that people won't necessarily see when they come to games, but a lot of internal ones that sort of needed to happen, sort of updates with the stadium. But in terms of how Wagney say it, what are the long-term plans to the stadium? I think you've touched a lot on sort of getting Reds sort of in-house, trying to utilise space a bit more. Is there anything that has sort of come up to you, certainly over the summer as you've been back?
I think what's interesting about... how do I articulate this? There are a lot of things that have been like, what if we did this or this idea, or like, look at this, or what's this cost? There's like so many of those things. And I think the grounds in Crawley as a town and a community are pretty ripe for a lot of advancement and improvement. And it's just a matter of, I think, and I kind of pitch this to you guys, like, especially if we can stay up this year, like the amount of visibility we get in League One and the amount of potential revenue that comes in. And there's a potential new deal with the Premier League and the EFL that is in the works that maybe gets signed off on, which makes it even better if you're in League One. Like, there's a lot of opportunity. And so it's a matter of then choosing what are the priorities, what should we be doing, what can we do immediately versus what's a couple-year process, and then sorting those. So I don't think I could speak to like one or two others specifically yet. An away fan zone is one that did come up, but there's like sewage and draining and flooding issues in the car park on that side. And if that gets sorted, which I think there was someone there yesterday actually cleaning the sewage. I'm not sure if that was connected to the city having them do it or not, or if the city council is willing to actually, help with the flooding. But if that's the case, then we should build an away fan zone there, because we're about to have 1,000+ fans supporting their away clubs here every game. So that's another one where it's like a no-brainer, but it isn't a no-brainer to spend however much it might cost to fix the flooding for the city.
Yeah.
So like it's like we have to figure out what
things have got to happen before other things happen. Basically,
order of operations, and then what is priority versus what's feasible. But there's not a lack of ideas and things to do for sure. So it's exciting in some ways, annoying in others, but like we're gonna get there.
Yeah. Someone's asked if will a purpose training ground ever be built for the club? Again, it's probably a similar thing. You've got to get your ducks in a row maybe here first before you look at that. We've obviously got a good base at Falmer at the moment. What were the sort of thoughts there?
I have a question. How would you have answered that, call it 2 years ago, or when we came in?
I would have said that, depending on who the manager is, because obviously I knew at that point that we didn't have a manager. So we've gone through a cycle of managers who are happy to train on 3G and who are not happy to train on 3G. So it depends on who you ask. Because if we had some of our previous managers in, they were more than happy to train on 3G. Scott is a big one on, he's very good at looking deeper into stuff. So he knows that training on 3G all year long can actually cause more injury in some cases, especially if you're not training on a very good 3G. Whereas, as I said, some managers probably wouldn't. So considering we were on 3G, but now we're on to grass, I'd say it's definitely a step in the right direction. 100%.
You passed the test. All right.
Good.
Sam can keep his job.
Thank God.
That was my answer right away, which I was just curious from like a fan or an employee standpoint how you would have answered it. the truth is training facilities one day for sure should be in the mix, especially when you actually account for how much land might cost and relative to how much you would pay a year to a Fulmer or a Southwater, I think the year before, to like rent out the space for a year. Like, you make your money back within 3 to 5 years anyway. And, depends somewhat, but, can we get there right away? No, but is that in the plans? For sure. But it was important right away to get on grass and get away from 3G and Horsham. So we've made that progression. This year we're going to be at Fulmer again. Can we get somewhere else by next year? I think it's possible. It's something to consider. It's something our ownership group has put a lot of thought into, especially recently, with an opportunity that's more or less local that could be really beneficial, that when you compare price points to what you rent, it's like, yeah, that's actually a no-brainer. So like, it's a discussion in the background, but it's one of those that you can't go from Horsham 3G to training facility right away necessarily, but we're at least on that pathway, and I think we'll get there soon.
Yeah, and I suppose a big part of that is becoming, I think you referenced it earlier in the podcast actually, the desire to become self-sustainable. Someone's asked, how realistic do you think that is, and how soon do you plan to achieve it? Because I think, again, you've been public saying that we've lost however many millions before, so there's clearly some work that needs to be done there. And is that something realistic that you can see happening for the club in the next few years?
I think, I'm unsure, so I'm looking at the fans, for those watching on YouTube, how much I can say, because I haven't looked into the legality of what I can say about what's coming potentially with a new deal between the Premier League and the EFL. Mm-hmm. It's been talked about publicly in generalities. I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm not going to use numbers or specifics. But the truth is, if that goes through, the entire point of it is to provide more funding and cash to lower league football clubs so that they can be more self-sustaining, but in a way that isn't like, oh, everyone's just going to spend it on players anyway, because then what's the point? That would be the Premier League's argument. So they're trying to get to a point where there might be some cost controls on things, but it is more money, it is more cash, so that a club like Crawley Town, which is already in the red and operating on a pretty low player budget relative to the rest of the league, especially League One, it offers us an opportunity to be more competitive potentially, especially if we're driving revenue in other ways, unique ways. And so as far as can we get self-sustaining, I think that answer is yes, for sure. We need to capitalize on our momentum being in League One and our commercial and sponsorship opportunities there, combined with, do we acquire the grounds eventually? Can we get real estate investment to build, like for those that visited MK, they have a pretty sick setup there with the hotel, their entire stadium, there's shops nearby, restaurants. I believe the number I've heard, which is not like, I haven't confirmed this, but it's just like to give you an idea, I'll give a range. MK brings in like between 3 and 4 times as much revenue just from their little small hotel there on the end of one of the sides of the stadiums than the actual football itself. Yeah. But if you have that, like, the football is in pretty good shape as far as finances go. So could we acquire the grounds and do something that provides not only more jobs for the community here, but potential revenue stream that does make Crawley Town Football Club more self-sustaining, and then the other one being the more cash flow from the Premier League deal that's potentially going to be getting closed over the course of the season and into next year. So between all of those things, like, is it possible that Crawley Town's actually break even or somewhat profitable eventually one day and playing at a high level? Absolutely. But there's a lot of work and a lot of patience that goes into it, which, again, sometimes patience is annoying but necessary.
Definitely. We've covered a lot there. That's all I had from our first batch of questions. As we said, we'll obviously be doing future episodes of this, so we will cover more and probably take a deeper dive, especially as we get up towards the season.
There were 2 that maybe didn't get on that
Maybe
sheet.
They did. Maybe I've got them on my other bit of paper. I was going to ask these at the end.
There was someone,
2 fun ones.
I have to just, because I got to brag a little bit. Someone said I have the best beard in Crawley Town. I'm not surprised you skipped that, to be honest. But
I was going to reorder it, in fairness. Maybe
you were going to put it at the top.
Suited at the end or the start. Yeah.
No, but then someone had an idea in the office today. Should we be doing like free pints for people with beards on like a game day in a couple months, especially if like we're doing Reds ourselves? I guess I could just make that decision, but that's something to think about. There was another one I was excited to like actually like
what type of moisturizer do you use on your skin? Was it that one?
Yeah, the moisturizer. So I don't really use moisturizer, but I was going to break some news. I don't talk about this publicly very often. Matt's looking at me like, what the hell's he about to say right now? I use hand sanitizer way too often. I have like super OCD with germs and stuff, and that's like at least 20 times a day I'm using hand sanitizer.
Wow.
And in America, we have this store called Bath and Body Works, which I think is maybe similar. Like in London, you'll have one called the Body Shop. There's not a bunch of them, but they have tons of great scented lotions or hand sanitizers is one of the things they have. Shampoos, soaps, whatever. And they have the best hand sanitizers. So Bath and Body Works hand sanitizers, like without fail, always carry a few on me in my backpack, like 100% of the time. So that's sort of the answer, but not really the answer. But those were the two I had in my head that I was really disappointed you didn't ask. So
no, I was going to save them to the end. I was going to tee you up nicely at the end, trust me. But no, it's good that we got those covered. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss in episode 1, other than the name, of course? We need a new name.
Yeah, someone give us a better name than On the Ground, which isn't awful, but it's not great. There's got to be someone out there with a better brain than me to figure out a creative one. And I asked you, and you didn't really have an idea.
No, I was struggling. I was going to revert back to Talk of the Town, but I'm going back to my old ways there.
So I had that thought. So for what it's worth, quick shout out to you and Charlie.
Yeah.
Does anyone else work on those?
Tom Cameron, yeah. Big shout
Tom
out.
as well.
In fairness, if we're going to shout out Talk of the Town, we've got to go way back. We've got to shout out Nick. We've got to shout out Tom in the office, Joe, Comber, the old commercial guy. That was their baby, to be fair. And we sort of took it over after the COVID season.
So I know Joke went back in the YouTube and I was like watching some of those because I couldn't remember the name of them off the top of my head. And I was like, oh, what if we just use that? And then it was like too good for me to even like take the name. I was like, oh, that was really well done. That deserves its own place. This needs to just be something separate. So shout out to the Talk of the Towners because a lot of those were really well done, and I watched a few just like literally a week ago.
Yeah, no, that was good times. That was good fun going away, literally with nobody in the ground, and there we were setting up with this sort of 4 or 5 cameras set up, going live back to Crawley. I think a few people gave us some weird looks, but no, that was good fun. But yeah, definitely let us know any suggestions for names. We are open to suggestions, but for now, On the Ground we'll stay until we hear a better one. What's the plan? We're thinking weekly, we're thinking bi-weekly, monthly?
I think I pitched this to Sam and he's like, yeah, let's do one like once a season. And I was like, no, we got to do a little more. I think like twice a month's probably perfect. Weekly's probably too much. But part of what I kind of told you, and then we can wrap this up, there's going to be fan questions throughout. We'll hit on some obviously as we go. We're going to have a fans forum on the 5th, but I also want to try to bring as much of a inside look to the actual football and like preparation, or like, as long, dependent somewhat on what Scott's comfortable with me sharing and whoever else. But like, if it's like, how did we look against so-and-so, Blackpool Saturday, looking ahead to Cambridge this Saturday, like let's actually analyze what we saw and talk like do you guys say X's and O's? Yeah. That was like a maybe not really.
People will understand that.
They understand that? Okay. Talk X's and O's. But the hope is that I can give you guys more of a deep dive on the actual football, which I know a lot of people might appreciate. So if you're doing that only once a month, it's not as cool. So I'm thinking like once every 2 weeks will be pretty good timing. And then we can kind of go as it plays out and see. There might be an appetite to do them weekly, and then I'd make you do them weekly with me. But we'll see. Well, for now, I think twice a month is probably perfect.
Yeah, make sure you're subscribed on all the relevant channels. Obviously, this first one will certainly be going out on YouTube, and obviously we'll be on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. Preston, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sam.
We will return.
And Matt.
Oh yeah, and Matt.